Today we are looking at section 1.4. Our target today is I can add and subtract real numbers. We're going to start out with the rules for addition. And the rules for the addition are the following. Number one, if you have a positive number added to a positive number, the answer is always a positive number. Number two, if you have a negative plus a negative, the answer is always negative. So in other words, if the signs are the same, your answer is going to be the same signs as the two numbers you're adding together. However, if the signs are different, for instance, a positive plus a negative, or a negative plus a positive, then there's a question. The answer will always be the sign of the type of number you have most of. So the sign of the type you have most of. Whoops. For example, if I have a negative 8 plus a positive 2, well, I have more negatives than I have positives, so that means my answer is going to be a negative. And then I just take 8 minus 2, the difference between 8 and 2 is 6. So it's going to be a negative 6. Or, for instance, if I have a 4 plus a negative 3. Well, I have more positives than negatives, so my answer is going to be positive, and it's going to, the difference between 4 and 3 is 1, so it's a positive 1. If I have, for instance, 5 plus negative 15. Well, I have more negatives, so my answer is going to be negative. And the difference between 5 and 15 is 10, so it's going to be a negative 10. One last example, if I have 5 plus 26, well, I have more positives than I have negatives. And so then my answer is going to be positive, and the difference between 26 and 5 is 21, so it's a positive 21. Okay. Now, the rules for subtraction are really just the rules for addition because of the following. The fact that A minus B can always be rewritten as an addition problem in the form A plus negative B. So for instance, if I have 7 minus 5, that's the same thing as 7 plus a negative 5. So any subtraction problem can be rewritten as an addition problem. So for instance, if I have 12 minus negative 3, well, remember minus a negative makes it positive. So that's going to be 12 plus 3, or 15. Okay? Let's look at some examples. Okay, number 1, if I have negative 17 plus 12, well, I have more negatives than positives, so my answer is going to be negative. And the difference between 17 and 12 is 5. So I have 5 more negatives than I have positives. If I have negative 17 minus 12, well, that's really the same thing as negative 17 plus negative 12. So I have a negative plus a negative, so my answer is going to be negative, and then I just add them all up. That's going to be 29. If, however, I have positive 17 minus negative 12, that's really 17 plus 12. So that's going to be a positive 29. Right, let's look at this example. If I have negative 12 plus 18 plus negative 3 plus 2 plus negative 1. Well, following order of operations, I would work from left to right. And reading from left to right, the first thing I read is negative 12 plus 8, or 18, I'm sorry, negative 12 plus 18. Well, I have more positives than negatives, and I actually have 6 more positives than negatives, so it's going to be 6 plus negative 3 plus 2 plus negative 1. Continuing on, moving left to right, this is going to give me a positive 3. Continuing on, left to right, this is going to be 5 plus negative 1. And that's going to give me a positive 4, because I have more positive, 4 more positives than I have negatives. Let's look at another example with absolute values involved. So I have the absolute value of 5 minus 12 minus the absolute value of 13 minus 2. Now, absolute value symbols are similar to grouping symbols or parentheses. So we always do what's inside first. So we would do this first, and we would get negative 7. We would do this, and that would give us a positive 11. Then we do the actual absolute value. So the absolute value of negative 7 is 7. The absolute value of 11 is 11. And remember, again, absolute value is the distance from 0. So negative 7 is 7 units from 0. So that's why it's 7. And positive 11 is 11 units from 0. So it's 11. Then remember that any subtraction can be rewritten as an addition. So this is really 7 plus negative 11. So I have more negatives than positives, so I'm going to have negative 4 as my answer. Right, now that brings us to another rule, which is the distributive property. And the distributive property applies to both addition and subtraction. The distributive property for addition says that A times the sum of B plus C is the same thing as the product of A plus B plus the product of A times C. In other words, if I have, for instance, 2 times 3 plus x, the distributive property says I can do 2 times 3 plus 2 times x. which when I simplify will give me 6 plus 2x. And it's the same thing for subtraction. If I have a times b minus c, then that's the same thing as the product of ab minus the product of ac. So for instance, if I have 6 times x minus 4, that's the same thing as 6 times x minus 6 times 4. Order of operations says we do multiplication before subtraction. So this is 6x minus 24. So another example, something that you might see on your homework, would be something like this. 4 times 2x squared minus x minus 1. While the distributive property applies here, again, we take the 4 times everything inside the parenthesis. So this is going to be 4 times 2x squared minus 4 times x minus 4 times 1. This simplifies to 8x squared. This simplifies to 4x. This simplifies to 4. Then we can not combine any like terms, and so at that point we are done. Another example that you might see in your homework would be 8x plus 3 times 4x minus 9. So in this case, we look inside parentheses, can't do anything there. So the next step would be to remove the parentheses using distributive property, which would give us 3 times 4x minus 3 times 9. Simplifying. Then, with these two, we use the reverse of the distributive property, and we factor out the x. We would get 8 plus 12 times x minus 27. And so 8 plus 12 is 20, so that would give us 20x minus 27. And of course the shortcut is to just add the 8 and the 12 here and go straight to this. Alright, that's our lesson for today. I hope you enjoyed our lesson, and we'll see you in class tomorrow.